Good. Good. All right. Today we're going to find out if you're smart. So this is going to be Phaladipika's information about the fifth house. The last 4 weeks we were looking at how we would interpret the fourth lord, the third lord, the second lord, etc. Last week we had more than the usual number of verses about the fourth house because he gave us information about how to use the relationship between the first lord and the fourth lord to understand the relationship with one's mother. And he said that this was useful not just for the fourth house. So as if to counterbalance it, since he spent extra time on the fourth house, as if to counterbalance it, he spends less time than usual in the fifth. So he just really gives one verse about the fifth house, which is really fine, actually. Because it's a good, clear, concise system. You don't really need more than one. So let's see what he has to say. Just a second. Okay. Switch it to show you this. A person would be intelligent and honest if the fifth house is in a Somya division, and the fifth house is linked to Somya, and the fifth lord has good divisions and is in a good house. Somyak shang se Somya yukte panchame vatarishvare vaishe shikam se sadbhave tima nishkapati bhavet. So we got this phrase Somya. A person would be intelligent and honest if the fifth house is in a Somya division. So Somya can mean two things. I mean, there's Krura and Somya, right? The actual Sanskrit words for what we call these days malefic and benefic is Krura and Somya, which means hard and soft, or cruel and gentle, harsh and generous, like mean and nice. So maybe Somya means that, benefic, but also Soma is a name for the moon. And so Somya also is a name for Mercury, the child of the moon. So there's two meanings here. When we say Somya in this text, it means moon and it means Mercury. I'm sorry, it means benefic and it means Mercury. So it kind of makes sense that he would mention Mercury when he's talking about the fifth house, because the fifth is the house of intelligence and Mercury is the planet of intelligence. So I would suggest what he's saying is benefics including or especially Mercury. So knowing that, when he says the fifth house should be in a Somya division, Somyarkshamshe. Arksha is one way of referring to a Rashi, and Amsha, Amsha like Navamsha. Panchame. If the fifth division is Somya, then the person should be intelligent and honest. So that means if the fifth division belongs to a benefic, or if the fifth division especially belongs to Mercury, or even the basic way is half of the zodiac signs are Somya and half are Krura. The masculine signs are Krura and the feminine signs are Somya. That's another meaning of Krura and Somya, is male and female. So you have those three ideas to work with. My suggestion is not to ask me which one is the right one, but to understand that probably the best would be for it to be in Mercury's sign. Second best would be to be in Jupiter or Venus sign. Third best would be to be in any female sign. Elsewhere, not good. It doesn't meet this requirement. And the other thing is, he's talking about the fifth amsha. So what does he mean by that? What's the fifth amsha? There's, as far as I would look at it, or in my mind, there's two questions. There's two ways of seeing it. Let me just check this. Yeah, that's still okay. In my mind, there's two ways of seeing it. One is the fifth sign in the Navamsha. In other words, the fifth house in the Navamsha. Or the other way of seeing it is the Navamsha of the fifth house. So bear in mind that you could look at both of them. We'll look at some actual charts to see how it works. So let's continue. Somyak Shamshe Somya Yukte. So if the fifth house has Somya's division, or if the fifth house is linked to Somya, that's what Yukte means. So a link can form in several ways. The most popular is conjunction. The next most popular or well-known is aspect. So in other words, if you have Somya aspecting or in the fifth house, that indicates intelligence. So again, it means any benefic, but especially Mercury. And the third point is the fifth lord is Vatad Ishwari, that Ishwara, the Ishwara, the lord of Panchame, of the fifth. If it is Vaisheshika Amsha, that's a concept that we learned earlier. Vaisheshika Amsha means it has good divisions. So the more times that you find a planet is in domicile or exaltation in the various amshas that have signs or rulers, like the Treka, the Pamsa, Navamsha, Saptamsha, Dashamsha, the more times you find it in its own division or in exaltation division, then the higher the tally goes. And to have more than one becomes more Vaisheshika. The more you have the more there's more than one, or the more of those cases that you have, the better. So if the lord of the fifth house has Vaisheshikamsha, or if it's Sadbhava, if it's in a good house, then the results, Pavet, are Timan, which means intelligent, and Nishkapati, which is kind of means honest. But what is it with honesty in the fifth house? So kapati means to cheat at something or to hide something. So in the fifth house is good at sharing things, not hiding things. The fifth house is good at sharing. So if your fifth house is good, then you're good at sharing. It's nishkapati. Means you don't feel the need to hide things. You don't hide things. You're not deceptive. You're open, straightforward. So if the fifth house is good, those are the results. Those are some of the results. What he's mentioning here, you should be open, like communicative, and you should be intelligent. Okay, any question with this basic yoga, let's say, or this basic template of what to look for with the fifth house? A person would be intelligent and honest if the fifth house is in a Somya division. if the fifth house is linked to Somya, or if the fifth lord has good divisions and is in a good house. Let me see what's going on. Dawn asked if I'll be online next week in the week. I plan to, but you never know. Okay. So far, so good. Okay. All right. Let's look at some examples. Everybody thinks Einstein is pretty smart, right? So let's look at Einstein's chart. Is it too small? Nah. You can, hopefully you have it on a bigger screen. You can zoom in if you need to. So this is Einstein's chart. Let's look at this first thing. Is his fifth house in a Somya division? That's what his fifth house looks like. It's at 12 degrees of Scorpio. 12 degrees of Scorpio is Libra. And Libra belongs to Venus, so maybe that's what he means about it being in a Somya division. Of course, if Einstein was born a little bit before 11:30 a.m., then the fifth division would be in Virgo. So this might be one way of suspecting that the birth time might be a little bit later. This is a Rodden confirmed a AA birth time. It's a confident birth time, but still it's from 1879. So maybe the birth time is a little bit sooner and it's actually in Virgo. But even just taking the birth time as it is, it's in Libra. Let me just check what his Navamsha looks like, because I mentioned there's two ways of seeing the fifth Navamsha. One is the fifth sign in the Navamsha. This is not that way. It doesn't come out the same. What I've done here is I've taken literally the Amsha of the fifth house. So you take the fifth house cusp, which is 12 degrees Scorpio. Why is it 12 degrees Scorpio? Because the ascendant is 12 degrees Cancer. So that's an unusual sound. So 12 degrees of everything, of every sign is the cusp of that house. Let me check and see what his, like if you do it from the Navamsha, which is kind of the way more people would think of doing it. His ascendant Navamsha. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, his ascendant Navamsha is Libra. But again, if he's born a little bit earlier, it could be Virgo. But in any case, but the Navamsha, his fifth Navamsha sign is Aquarius. So this inclines me to do it. I mean, just by looking at Einstein's chart, I'm getting the initial inclination that it's preferable to use the cusp of the house to see, is this in a benefic Amsha, or especially is it in a Mercury Amsha? In Einstein's case, it is, in fact, in a benefic Amsha. Why is the Amsha so important? Because it's showing you the way, the inner operation of the thing. In the sense, it's like there's all different kinds of intelligence. And whether or not it functions efficiently or not is known by the heart of it, which is the Navamsha. So using that theory, you'd interpret Einstein as this very occult kind of intellect. A scorpionic kind of intellect, something for the occult. So it's something, just weird mysteries, abstract thoughts, things that people can't see, things about the universe. And it functions well because he has a benefic Navamsha. If he had a Scorpio thing, if he had a Scorpio fifth house with something else, like let's say Oh, Aries. Then maybe it wouldn't be so intelligent for the occult. Maybe he would be. It would be more like he's inspired to utilize the occult for things. That's the idea there. The next point that Phaladipika mentioned was the fifth house itself should be linked to Somya. So let's check that one next. So Jar, I think I just answered the question a bit, right? Does the placement of the fifth house lord signal the type of intelligence? Yes, that's also the placement of the fifth lord. Let's look at this with this case of Einstein. So far what we're seeing about Einstein is because his ascendant is Cancer, then his intellect is more intuitive because it's a water sign and it's Scorpio. Any Cancer ascendant will be that way. He has a Libra Navamsha, maybe probably more likely a Virgo Navamsha of Scorpio. So he's got a highly intellectual functioning intuition. So in other words, he's thinking intellectually about some very abstract things. Now let's see what his Lord says about it, etc. Let's also just check and see what is influencing his fifth house. That's the next point. What's influencing the fifth house? Hopefully it's Somya, which means hopefully it's Mercury or a benefic. In Einstein's case, the strongest aspect on the fifth house cusp is from Venus. And that maybe signifies maybe 1130 is exactly correct because Venus is the lord of the fifth's Navamsha. In either case, Mercury is also putting a bit of an influence on here too. Now you may be thinking, what? What kind of aspects are those? And you have to go back to square one and learn about how you do aspects. But really briefly, you would take the aspect of an inner planet from 17 Aries to 12 Scorpio. So it would be almost exactly 210 degrees. It would be 3 degrees less than 210, which is basically an eighth house aspect, but a little stronger than an eighth house aspect because it's closer to the seventh. So it would be plus more than 75% aspect. This is just the quick way of estimating what it is. In Venus's case, it's 80%. So that's a good thing. So Einstein is matching this so far. The fifth lord. So the third thing he said was, how about the fifth lord? What's the fifth lord doing? This is where Einstein's chart really gets good. What is the fifth lord doing in Einstein's chart? Well, what is the fifth lord? If the fifth house is Scorpio, then the fifth lord is Mars. So what's up with his Mars? First of all, it's exalted, very exalted. So it's already Vaisheshikamsha a bit. It's off to a good start. In the main chart, it's exalted. Secondly, it's in a Kendra. It's in the seventh house, so it has Sadbhava. It's in a good house. And then if you check the Amshas, look where it is. It's actually in Virgo, Navamsha. Can you see that on the circular chart? You can see it's at the end of Capricorn, so that means it's in the last division of Capricorn, the last Navamsha of Capricorn, which is Virgo. So that's Somya's division, especially. So the Ishvara, the Lord of the fifth house, has Mercury's division. Probably the fifth house also has Mercury's division. And hence, probably the fifth lord is conjoined with the cusp via the Navamsha. This is how you would rectify a birth time for somebody that has such an outstanding intellect. And when you look at Einstein's fifth lord across all of his amshas, it's in Mercury's amsha 3 times. It's in Mercury's amsha in the 9th division, also in the Treka, and also in the 16th. And it has 4 otherwise strong amshas, like exaltation or domicile: the 1st, the 7th, the 12th, and the 30th. So Einstein's fifth lord is what's really sounding the trumpet for you to recognize from this chart that this guy's fantastically intelligent. What is it? Initially, you just see, oh, it's exalted and it's in a Kendra. And then secondly, you see its amshas are great. So it's got terrific Vaisheshik amsha, including being in Mercury's amsha many times. And then on top of that, I think I'm also going to mention, on top of that, there's other things about this fifth lord. It's in Raja Yoga by virtue of Parivartana, which is making it the savior in a Nich Bhanga for Saturn, which is its lord. So it's really his fifth lord. But he matched every single condition that Phaladipika stated for having a great intellect. Number 1, his 5th Navamsha belonged to Mercury or a benefic. Number 2, he had the influence of Mercury or a benefic on his 5th lord, on his 5th house. Number 3, his 5th lord had many good amshas, including Mercury's amshas, and was in a good house. So that's Einstein. Make sense? We're going to look at other people two other very well-known smart people. But any questions about Einstein's chart? Let's just, while I wait to see if you have any questions, let's review what he said one more time. What Phaladipika said. The person would be intelligent and honest or communicative if the 5th house is in a Somya division. The 5th house is linked to Somya, and the 5th lord has good divisions and is in a good house. Somyark Shamshe Somya Yukte Panchame Vatadishvare Vaishesh Kamse Sadbhave Timan Nishkapati Bhavet. Okay, any questions? Silch? Okay, we got 2. Tatiana. When you have 4 grahas placed in the 5th house in Pisces, will you become interested in politics? I don't know. I'm thinking about Einstein's chart right now. Jewel Fool, really loving the deep dive so far. No questions. Keeping it. Okay, good. Let's look at another smarty pants. Oh, Jar, I'm curious about how Einstein's moon works with this reading. Let's see. Einstein, where's your moon? It's in 6th house as the first lord in Sagittarius. So a moon in the 6th house in an intelligent sign is a problem-solving type of emotional disposition. The person enjoys facing challenges and solving problems. That's their fun. So Einstein has that. He has the moon in the 6th in an intelligent sign. Furthermore, he has the Lord of the 6th in the 8th. So that's a person that likes probing They like solving problems about not terribly practical problems. They like deep problems or obscure problems or occult problems. Okay, let's see who's next on The Price is Right. I think probably this person is even smarter than Einstein. Although Einstein is super famous because he kind of cracked a code, let's say. But Leonardo da Vinci is really something. Let's see what his chart looks like and how it matches this formula. First one is, how about his fifth house? What about the Amsha of the fifth house? Well, look at that. It's in Gemini. The Amsha is Gemini. The fifth house Amsha is Gemini. Let's just check and see what the fifth house the straight Navamsha fifth house is, Just the fifth sign from the Navamsha ascendant. Leo. Nardo. That's also Virgo. So in his case, it winds up with both of them. Actually, his Navamsha is pretty tuned up too. So for Einstein, it was certainly more of what we'd expect when we looked at the Navamsha of the fifth cusp. With Da Vinci, it works either way. The fifth Navamsha sign is Virgo, and the fifth Navamsha cusp is Gemini. They're both Mercuries. Furthermore, the house has Mercury in it. Secondly, it's not just in the house, like barely in the house. It's at 9 degrees, and the cusp is at 7 degrees. It's very close. And look where it is. It's in Gemini, Navamsha. So Da Vinci really has Mercury working in the fifth house. In an Aries context, in an Aries machine. The fifth lord, which is also Mars, similar to Einstein. The fifth lord, how's his fifth lord doing? It was Einstein's fifth lord that was really, really strong. The fifth house was kind of okay. With Da Vinci, at least from what I see right away, it's the fifth house that's really bam. And let's see about the fifth lord. The fifth lord, Mars, it's Vargotama. So since it's in Vargotama, it means it's in a good Amsha and it has a good dignity. So that's giving it the quality of being Vaisheshik Amsha. You know what Vargotama means, right? And you can see it here in the depiction. It's in Aquarius sign and in the Aquarius division of that sign. It's in the third house. Is the third house a Sadbhava? It's not usually considered a Sadbhava. However, in relation to the fifth house, the third house is a good spot. The fifth house is good for the third, and the third house is good for the fifth lord. And similarly, the 11th house is good for either of them. This is because they both have to do with input and output from the consciousness. Third and fifth both have to do with input and output from the mind. So they both have to do with intellect. You can see they both border the fourth house, which is the mind. So he does have a good sadbhava, a good position for his fifth lord, for intellect. Oh yeah, I guess that's it. So it's not really his fifth lord that's really ticking all the boxes like Einstein. It's his fifth house that really ticked all the boxes. So you can see sometimes some parts You can compare Einstein with Leonardo da Vinci and see how the technique works. Identified both of them as being very intelligent people. The Drunken Tarot asks, what would be a case where a person is smart, however they are unable to execute or get the rewards? What does that mean? Week 3rd, moon debilitated. Thank you. Sorry if these are not smart questions. What does it mean that they're not able to execute? So if a person is smart but isn't able to execute, it probably means that they have some problem up above in the upper houses, like 10 and 11, maybe 9. So that means they're having a hard time dealing with the external world. Of course, you can get that also with some kind of problem. And it can also come from internal problems. You may have a problem dealing with the external world because of an internal problem. But in this case, if the person is very smart, maybe they're okay on the inside. I mean, you actually look at the chart, but you're asking me just this generic question, like the question without a specific chart. So I would say I would probably expect it to be okay on the inside. So probably the problems would be from the outside and how they deal with the outside. So you would probably find that although they have a good intellect and so forth, they don't have a good confidence or practical toughness in dealing with the external world, and that makes them unable to execute on their ideas. And then you could also see problems with various things like sun, something that's a karaka of one of those houses. Jewel asks, why does Mars have good dignity? Because it's Vargotama. Look. You see, do you know what Vargotama means? Varga Uttam, the best Varga, the best Amsha. What's the best Amsha? The best Amsha in any sign is the Amsha that's the same as the sign. So the best Navamsha in Aries is Aries. The best Navamsha in Taurus is Taurus. The best Navamsha in Gemini is Gemini. The best Navamsha in Aquarius is Aquarius. If a planet is in that best Navamsha, it gets the status of being domicile, of being in its own sign, because it's a similar dynamic. It's comfortable with the place. It understands the place. So by those basic rules, that's a very basic rule of Vedic astrology, and by that rule, Mars has domicile, dignity, in this chart, in Da Vinci's chart. Thank you, Tarot. Bill Cipher, if the 5th house receives strong aspects from a strong moon, does that make their intelligence changeable? I would need to see it. Let's see what you're talking about. Usually the moons that are fuller are more stable, and usually the moons that are emptier are more changeable. I'd need to see that. To decide. So there's one other smart person. It's Nicholas Copernicus. Let's check out Nicholas Copernicus's chart. Wait, there's one more thing here. Okay. Bill, because I thought the moon also signifies intelligence. It does not. It signifies mind. And mind is emotions. Emotions are your biases and your opinions. It's not have to do with intelligence. It has to do with what you like. The thing is that the intelligence has to work with the mind. So if the mind isn't in a healthy condition, then even if the intelligence wants to be in a healthy condition, it won't. The emotion can disturb the intelligence. The intelligence also can put the emotions in order. But it's more difficult for the intelligence to put the emotions in order than it is for the emotions to disturb the intelligence. Hello, does that ring a bell with everyday life? So that's just the way it is. So it's not that the moon represents intelligence, but secondarily it has an effect on intelligence. So for example, Einstein's moon was 6th house. 6th house Sagittarius with Jupiter in the 8th house. So that was obvious, like, here's a person that can really solve problems of an abstract nature. What about DaVinci's moon? 4th house moon in Pisces with Jupiter. So his moon is also very untroubled. And his moon likes Jupiter and likes Pisces. So his moon likes thinking. It likes thought. It likes intelligence. It likes learning. So it's not going to get in the way of his intelligence at all. What if planets in late degree? Like 29 degree, if planets placed in the 5th house, what's the problem? If you're on Bob Sunday, then you have that problem of 29 or later. But if your house cusp is also at 29 degrees, then it gets stronger. Brandon, DaVinci's polymath capabilities also arise out of his Satabishak moon. Satabishak. I guess. Polymath. Polymath means you're good at a lot of things, doesn't it? This chart is kind of incredible, to be honest. First of all, look, you're dealing with a person who has a Sagittarian ascendant. But what the real thing is, to learn something new, to learn what this person, Phaladipika Mantreshwar, is teaching you, you should really kind of focus on the stuff that he told. Which is, look at the 5th house. Is it connecting with Mercury? So is the Amsha of the 5th house in a sign that belongs to Mercury? And is Mercury in the 5th house or influencing it? That's where all of a sudden you see Leonardo da Vinci is obviously really smart. Polymathic, because look, he also has an exalted planet in his 11th house. He's the 5th in the 3rd. So he's not a nerd. He's able to draw. He's able to appreciate arts. He's able to invent. A 6th lord in the 6th house. So with the sun in the 6th house. So he's able to overcome problems, solve things. He doesn't come up against walls and then stop there. Also, one thing that you notice about Da Vinci, which you would also notice about Einstein, is that Saturn, Saturn is working in this picture too. This is not something that Mantreshwar mentioned, but I'll mention it to you. If you have intelligence working without Saturn, you get people that have really big ideas, but they are not practical. Maybe this is answering that question of that it doesn't execute well. When Saturn works with the intelligence, so when Saturn is affecting the 5th house and Mercury, then the person really understands the difference between a useful concept and a useless concept, between a realistic concept and an unrealistic concept, between an idea that has logic and an idea that is illogical. So look at how you see that working with Da Vinci. His Mercury is right opposite to his Saturn. So they have mutual aspect with each other. Moreover, his 5th lord is in Saturn's sign and Saturn's Amsha. And then looking at Einstein, his 5th lord is in Saturn's sign and Mercury's Amsha. And Mercury is tightly conjoined his Saturn. So that's another little thing that I would suggest you look for. If the person is intelligent, then Saturn adds logic to it. If the person is not intelligent, then Saturn is just lethargic. It just slows the intelligence down. So in other words, if the indicators in the fifth house are good and Saturn is in the picture, then here's a logical person. If the indicators in the fifth house are not good and Saturn is in the picture, here's a slow-minded person. Let's take a look at Copernicus, the hero. Virgo ascendant. Again, it's so just starting from the very basics. Einstein didn't help us with that. Like, it wasn't his ascendant that gave it away, unless you actually realize that Cancer is a very sattvic sign. So Cancer is being very sattvic. It also has a good aptitude for intellect. But for Copernicus and for DaVinci, we had very classically philosophical or intellectual signs. Sagittarius for DaVinci, Virgo for Copernicus. Here's an example of a Sandhi. There's a question of a late degree, early degree. Here's the Copernicus is 1 degree Virgo. It's great for what it does with amshas. It keeps you all on the same element and keeps you all in the trines, all the amshas. Okay, now let's see what's going on with this chart. His fifth house is not in a Somya division, nor is it in a Somya thingamajig. It's not in a Somya division or in a Somya Rashi, but it's Vargotama. And like, remember what I was just saying about Saturn and Mercury's the Saturn Mercury recipe? Virgo has a great potential for having that very quality of realizing this is a practical idea and this is not and that's an impractical idea. This makes sense and that doesn't. This is rational and that's not. Because the fifth sign from Virgo is Capricorn, Saturn's sign. So Virgo by nature has some Saturn in connection with its intellect already. Moreover, there's Copernicus with his fifth lord in Gemini. We'll look at that in a second. So the fifth house didn't meet Phaladipika's criteria of being in a Somya division, but it does meet the criteria of Vargotama solving any problem. Vargotama is always good. And that's what I meant about what the ascendant is at an early or late degree of a sign. It does these good things. With the amshas, especially with the navamsha. It puts the houses either trine to each other or Vargotama with each other. So it would be all the cardinal signs would be Vargotama. If you're at 1 degree, Copernicus's cardinal signs would all be Vargotama. And the other ones would be trine, I think. Okay, so this fifth house is Vargotama. The strongest influence on his fifth house, which is phenomenally the strongest, like the other planets are not influencing his fifth house, is from its own lord. So here again, the Phaladipika said, we want Somya in the fifth house, and we want Somya to influence in the fifth house. What Somya means is a bit vague. It generally means benefic. The lord of a house is always benefic to it. Mercury is a special benefic. So if the lord of the fifth house is interacting with the fifth house, or Mercury, it's very special. Furthermore, if you have a Vargotama fifth house, it's Somya. It's good for the house. So Copernicus is getting the influence of Somya to his fifth house by virtue of its lord having a very strong influence on it and nobody else having an influence on it. The fifth lord, Saturn, is in Gemini and Pisces Amsha. So it's a Somya Amsha and it's an intelligent Amsha and it's in Gemini. And it's, and by the way, it's Sadbhava. Obviously it's Sadbhava, it's in the 10th house. And it has 3 strong amshas, the 7th, the 12th, and the 30th. So it has Vaisheshik amsha. So what Copernicus, where he literally ticked off the exact things that Phaladipika said to look for is in the fifth lord. Like Einstein, it was really the fifth lord that ticked the boxes. His fifth lord is in Mercury's sign, and it's in an intellectual or a benefic amsha, and it's in a good house, and it has Vaisheshik amsha. Where it didn't necessarily tick the boxes, it ticked them if you think about it, because it has Vargotama cusp, and it has the influence of its own lord. Let's see what these other questions are now. Bill Cipher. So the fifth lord in many of Mercury's amshas and dignified, even though Rashi chart doesn't aspect the fifth at all, still means that Mercury is influencing the fifth? No, it doesn't mean that Mercury is influencing the fifth, but it means that Mercury is good. It means that the intelligence is good. Yeah, okay, so it means that Mercury is influencing the fifth lord. I see what you're saying. If the fifth lord is in a Mercury sign, then the fifth lord is some connection with Mercury. Just like if you're in my house, even if I'm not there, you have some connection with me because you're in my house. That's my house. All my way of doing things, my way of organizing things, etc., is in the house. You're exposed to it. Similarly, if a planet is in Mercury's sign, then it's exposed to Mercury's nature. So if the fifth lord has a lot of contact with Mercury's signs, then it's got Mercury's influence, even if it doesn't have an aspect from Mercury and so forth. That was in text 30 of chapter 15, one of the most useful texts of the Phaladipika, of the different ways that planets can have connection or yukti with each other. It's not just by conjunction or aspect, it's also by being in one another's signs. Jar says, hypothetical question, would an exalted or multricon Saturn aspecting a strong fifth house possibly strain the individual's intellect? If strained, possibly for the good of the individual? Well, I don't know if I would call it a strain. What we're looking at right now, what we're looking at right now is a lot of influence from Saturn as the fifth lord. But what we're looking at here with Leonardo da Vinci is a lot of influence from an exalted Saturn on Mercury and on the fifth house. So what does it mean? Is it straining the fifth? It's not straining it. It's restraining it. So that will mean restrained intellect, unless you have strong intellect. If your intellect is strong and it's being restrained, that means, if you know different people and how they think, you know what I'm talking about. If your intellect is strong and unrestrained, then you just get wild ideas. And you can't tell the difference between a conspiracy theory and a well-researched fact. Or you can't tell the difference between your reasonable idea and your wild idea. They both seem equally possible to you. That's just a big intellect that's not restrained. But if you have a big intellect that's restrained, then you have that ability to say, this is obviously a good idea, and that's obviously not a good idea. If you have a weak intellect that's restrained, then you just don't have any creativity and you don't have any interesting thought. So the recipe with DaVinci, for example, and with Einstein, and with Copernicus, really, is that Saturn is influencing a strong intellectual scenario. Brandon, my opinions of Copernicus have decreased since finding out that the Bhagavatam author understood the structure of the solar system. Well, it shouldn't decrease your opinion of Copernicus, because he didn't read the Bhagavatam. He figured it out on his own. Also, he did a lot of things that the Bhagavatam didn't do, like give a lot of math to demonstrate it and prove it. I mean, he did a lot of things that has nothing to do with that. Thank you, Sabrina. Bill Cipher says, Vic, very silly question, but maybe I still don't understand this. The Amsha of a house. Well, that's what I was talking about at the beginning. Bill is asking, the Amsha of a house, what is it? Is it the sign of the house in the D9, or is it the degree of the ascendant? And which Amsha it is in for the fifth house? It just helps for you to try to do some astronomy. Everybody should do that. Everybody should just try to draw these charts. You try to draw them. It helps for you to try to make an actual chart. So try to make a circle chart, for example, and put the Navamshas in the circle charts. Here's the pictures for you. There it is. You see that little picture that popped up down there? That's what Navamshas look like when they're drawn on a wheel. That's what they literally are. And then you can put the points in there and you can see, that's what it means that Mercury is in Gemini Navamsha, because that's 9 degrees of Aries. And if the cusp of the 7th house is at 7 degrees of Aries, then it's also going to be in the Gemini Navamsha. So that is one way of seeing the 5th Amsha, is to look at the Navamsha of the 5th cusp. But the other way that might be what Phaladipika is talking about, the way that he might have thought of it, is to look at the 5th sign of the Navamsha, which is just dependent upon the rising Navamsha. So in these 3 cases, it worked out well for Einstein. Either way. For DaVinci, it didn't work well, right? Oh, for DaVinci, it works either way. His 5th Navamsha is Virgo, and his cusp of his fifth cusp is in the Gemini Navamsha. And for Copernicus, Copernicus, how do you spell it? Oh, Nicholas Copernicus, his 5th Navamsha, like the 5th sign, so his rising Navamsha is Capricorn. So actually look at that. That's actually interesting enough. Copernicus's rising sign is Virgo. What part of Virgo? The Capricorn part of Virgo. That's what I'm talking about, how you see Saturn and Mercury working together in a situation where the 5th house is good. So how would you suss that out for him? Let's go to his chart. How would you suss this out for him? Well, look, when Virgo rises, the 5th sign is Capricorn. So if his ascendant is in Capricorn, it means the 5th sign, you know what I mean? Capricorn for Virgo is intellectual. So to have the Capricorn portion of Virgo rising is intellectual. Furthermore, his 5th Lord Saturn is in Gemini, Mercury's other sign. So he's got a lot of connection between 5th house and Mercury and Saturn. Mercury and Saturn are connected in a good setting. His Jupiter is also doing good. His Jupiter is in Sagittarius in the 4th house. His Venus is also doing good. His Mercury is also doing fine because it's getting Neech Bhanga from Venus. And it's going to sit there and aspect the 1st house. Yeah, so I forgot what we were talking about there, but yeah, so that's the interesting way it works. The fifth amsha means either, you figure out what it means. I don't know what it means. I don't know what Mantreshwar meant by it. It either means the cusp, the amsha of the cusp, or the fifth sign in the Navamsha. Which for Copernicus, the fifth sign from Capricorn is Taurus. Any other questions? Good stuff. Thanks for, I can see all these cool reactions going off here. So it's been like an hour, yeah? Okay, we'll take one more. Would Caden House influences in the fifth? What's Caden House influences? Would Caden House influences on the fifth only change the area of life? What's a Caden House influence? I don't understand. I don't understand the question. And Bill also says, so it's more like adding up all the different influences and see the, of course, that's always how it is in every case. All right, my friends, thank you very much for the live stream. Thank you, Heidi.